Okay, excellent, thank you. So good evening, everybody. I would like to welcome you all to Cambridge City Council's Planning and Transport Scrutiny Committee meeting. My name is Councillor Antoinette Nestor and I'm the chair of this committee meeting. Please can those present in the room note that everything on your desk could be broadcast at some point as cameras within the room follow the microphone switched on. If you're following the Teams meeting here in the room, on your laptop, your audio, microphone and camera must be switched off. If the fire alarm sounds, please follow the officers who will leave the room and exit the building via the Pierce Hill staircase and exit. Do not use the lift. I will now roll call the councillors alphabetically by surname so the public can see who they are. If there are any other apologies, please let me know. Are you present, Councillor Bagent?
I am.
Thank you. Councillor Bick?
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Clough?
Present. Thank you.
Councillor, Councillor Griffin is not here, which is Councillor Pounds.
Yes, I'm here. Thanks.
And Councillor Porrer.
Present, Chair.
Thank you. And we have received apologies from Councillor Dikovic. She's feeling unwell this evening, so she cannot make it. And Councillor Swift.
Yes.
Thank you. Yeah, of course, sorry. You were here, I didn't see you. My apologies. Okay. The Executive Councillor for Planning, Building Control and Infrastructure, Councillor Thornborough, is also present. We welcome you.
Hello.
Now, Councillor Blackburn-Horgan has also joined the meeting virtually. Okay. Tonight to speak on the Cambridge Biomedical Campus item, and that's item 6. Welcome, Councillor Blackburn-Horgan. We're joined by the Planning Policy Manager, Jonathan Dixon, here in the chamber. And now, is Heather Jones attending? No. Okay, that's okay. And then we have Lizzie Wood, which is the Principal Planning Officer. And of course, we have also welcoming all the officers who have joined us tonight, either virtually as well or in person. And I will introduce each officer when it comes to the agenda item. We have here to my side, Committee Manager Claire Tuncliffe and Meeting Producer Boris Herzog, and also present throughout the meeting. So thank you very much for your help. Now, for those attending just now and online and do not really know the procedure, just to explain, the committee will receive a presentation from the relevant report author, and members will then discuss the report and vote on the recommendations. As chair, if the vote is split, I will have the casting vote. And following the vote of the committee, the executive councillor will be asked if they agree the decision. Now, have I missed any apologies? No? Okay. So we'll move on to agenda item 2. Please could committee members declare if they have any declaration of interest and identify which agenda item their declaration relates to. Yes, Councillor Bajan?
Member of Cambridge Cycling Campaign, Chair.
Thank you. Anybody else? No? Oh, okay. So we'll move on to agenda item 3, public questions, and I believe there are no public questions, so we'll go into straight to item number 4. Now, item 4, pages between 5 and 9 is the record of decision, is the draft North Cambridge Design Code. Members are asked to note this decision, which the Executive Councillor approved the draft Cambridge Neighbourhoods Design Code for Arbury, Kinhedges and part of West Chesterton for public consultation. As we'll be discussing the results of this public consultation in the next item, I propose that we go straight into item 5 and take this item as noted. Is that okay? Yes? Excellent. So we'll move to item number 5, which is the key decision. And they're on pages 11 to 429 of the draft North Cambridge Design Code. So before we start this item, I would like to remind members that Appendix 2 can be viewed online as a supplement on the agenda page unless you receive a separate hard copy. Now we're joined virtually by Jane Green, Built and Natural Environment Manager, Trovin Monteiro, Built Environment Team Leader, and Tom Davis, Senior Urban Designer. Welcome all, and Trovin, please begin, and I hope that's the right way to pronounce your name.
Yes, Chair. Thank you, and good evening, everyone. Thank you for providing us the opportunity to present the design code for Arbury, King's Hedges, and part of West Chesterton. The purpose of this report is to seek approval to adopt the design code for Arbury, King's Hedges, and West Chesterton as an SPD. Following central government funding, Greater Cambridge Shared Planning, working with Paula Thomas Edwards Architects, embarked on a community-led design code about a year and a half ago for the areas of King's Hedges, Arbury, and parts of West Chesterton to provide a vision based on the priorities of residents and businesses in the area. Over the past year and a half, we have engaged significantly with stakeholders, officers, and the community through in-person engagements and online through various events to co-produce this document using our award-winning Yes service, working with 4 schools in the area. The code is based on 5 principles that are very clear and easy to remember. Make space for nature, prioritize walking and cycling, produce thriving public spaces, enhance character, and increase sustainability. After carrying a lot of informal consultation, we formally consulted on the design code from the 6th of Jan to the 17th of February 2025. Generally, there was overwhelming support for these 5 principles, particularly making space for nature and sustainability. There were 3 key comments, through the various consultations that we have received. One was with regard to the length of the document, which is about 70 pages long. Design codes are generally lengthy documents of 100 pages plus, and we have tried our best to condense the document to as short a length as we could. But what we've done is we've also produced an executive summary at the start following consultation to ensure that the key outputs of the code are easily understood by residents in the community who don't have to read through pages and lengths of the document. The second point that was coming through the consultation was around the management of open spaces and streets in the area. And although some of this were not within the remit of planning and the local planning authority, we have included caveats for other stakeholders to take notice and take account of the needs of what local residents are saying, including, our colleagues at highways, but also within the management teams of Cambridge City Council. The third comment was around the needs of vehicles not being catered to. And these concerns, have been mentioned quite a lot within the consultation. Now, we have the second principles, which is based on prioritizing walking and cycling. This does not preclude people who, use vehicles for essential use. And we have ensured that the document actually takes account of the vehicle needs of users. But we need to ensure, in order to ensure that people have or deliver active lifestyle for better and creating better healthy communities, that we prioritize the balance which currently sits with vehicle use to that which encourages more walking and cycling for local trips. And this is one of the key aspects of the design code. So following these consultations, as mentioned, we have made these changes and we have brought this document to you to adoption. And I hope you will support these recommendations that we made to adopt this SPD. Happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Trevin. And we'll move to for questions. May I ask members to raise your hands if you have any question? Okay, Councillor Pounds, anybody else? And Councillor Porter and Councillor Claude. So I will take the 3 questions to Trevin and then I'll get back to you, okay? So Councillor Pounds.
Well, thank you for this report. This is very exciting, actually. I think it's a terrific document and a terrific idea. I just wanted to ask a little bit more about your consultation. I was very pleased to see a couple of things in there that you might not normally think of. One was the not having blank walls at the end of a facade on houses, because we know that there's so many blocks of particularly terrace houses, and then the end wall is a real eyesore of graffiti. And that struck me as being something quite unusual that people might not think of, but it's there in your document. And I would also quite like to ask about the accessible letterboxes, because I couldn't find anything about that. And then just generally, how did you feel that people engaged with this? Were you happy with the engagement from the public that you got? And did you get any surprises, really? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pounds. Councillor Porter?
Thank you very much, Chair. Yeah, this is very welcome. A huge amount of work on the part of officers. And I think it's really helpful to see the responses as well. So you said this, we did that. I think that's quite helpful. I did have some feedback from residents in the area that it was quite a dense amount of information. And I think if we do this again in future, we maybe need to look at how we could break it down in perhaps a different way, or maybe do sort of smaller quizzes and then let people delve further if they want to. Because the people there are good citizens, they were trying their best, but I suppose particularly if you're not used to ploughing through planning documents. But I do take the officer's point that this is a big document, but I think for next time it would be good to just think about how we make it a little bit more accessible and maybe get some of the headline points, even if we don't want to get all the detail. I think, I support the active travel principles that Trevain's just mentioned. And I think for me, this is the first one I think we've done in the city that's a place that's already built. So we've done design codes, land north of Cherry Hinton, where we have a blank canvas. So I think what will be really critical is that we make sure that we review this, maybe in a year, and probably in 5 years actually, to see if it is actually being used properly. Because it's a very different design code when we've already got buildings there. Because obviously we can't go, let's just stick in an extra cycleway, because we can't move the existing properties. So I'd just be interested in the officers' views on how and when we review this, because I think this will be a really good learning experience. And I think we should learn from it before we look at rolling it out elsewhere, because there may be things we need to change, because this is the first one in the city. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Porter. And Councillor Clough.
Yes, it's only a minor point, but when I did try to read the representations, but they're by question. I just wondered, when you looked at them by individual, what percentage of the individuals were giving a sort of a favourable response overall, or were you finding that there were, their representations, their responses were split? So what I'm driving at is whether there is an underlying current of thinking, well, I don't really get this, but I underlyingly object, but that's not evident.
Thank you. Trevain, would you like to start?
Thank you. I'll try my best to answer all of the questions. Initially, there was a question about blank walls and the inclusion of blank walls in the design code, which was good. That is certainly something that is supported. So we want to encourage more active uses or activity, so that through windows and front doors along public spaces, and so we are kind of supportive. So the code kind of mentions that in quite a lot of places. With regard to the accessible letterbox, we have included in the detailed design of buildings that people or developers are taking account of the detailed design of buildings that include various details, such as the window design, door design, but also letterboxes that are accessible. So that is included within the character chapter of the design code. Later on, if it needed, then I can provide the exact page reference as to where this is located. With regard to the type of engagement that we have carried out, so this is one of the design code where we have extensively, and I cannot stress that word, extensively done a lot of engagement. In fact, the whole premise of doing a design code that is area based and that doesn't have a master plan is predicated on getting views from people who live in that area. Otherwise, it's very difficult to identify priorities that are important for the people. And that is what is in effect guiding what principles are, come out from the process. And it's very much led by a series of phase-wise consultation that we carried out. The first phase was really asking residents, what they liked and didn't like about the area. Once we found that through an online and in-person survey, we have then gone on to draft the key principles that were easy and memorable. And we asked whether these were the right principles. And once we got a response on those, then we went to then write a little bit more detail, which has led to this 50-page document. So by no means, the 50-page document was the first thing that we actually consulted. It was going through a stepwise manner to consult, and then based on feedback, develop the code over time. I think it's certainly, I would suggest one of the models. We certainly, can learn from things to do things better. But there were certainly a lot of things, we have done which were quite right. I guess with regard to the length and size of the document, I think that's something perhaps we can take back and reflect and see what we can learn from in order to make it shorter. With regard to the review, we certainly need to do a review, and apologies, I haven't mentioned that in my presentation. So we have taken that back and thought through that. So we will be reviewing the document through the annual monitoring report that we do every year. And the detail of that, we have to think about how we incorporate that. But certainly through the monitoring report, we will assess the impact of how the design code is doing based on the applications that are coming forward in the area. And then the final question was around the percentage of favorable to non-favorable response. And I think this is a difficult kind of question to really judge and comment on. And that is primarily because we have been consulting over a period of a year and a half, right from initial concept ideas, or even before that, asking residents what they liked and didn't like, to getting support on the principles. And then once we get support on the principles, consulting on the detail informally, and then consulting formally. So it is quite a difficult question. We have about 300 plus engagements on it, and at different portions in time, there are different responses on different questions. So it's quite a difficult question to answer overall, whether 100% or 50%, were supportive overall or not. Thank you.
Thank you, Trevin. And I believe there's one more question from Councillor Swift.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I just wanted to say that I really liked the visualizations and the way that the consultation was laid out. I thought it was much easier to understand, and it was much better from a sort of architectural design point of view to be able to see the massing and the sort of the way the buildings would go around central spaces and the vegetation. I thought that it was a very well designed package and very easy to actually comment on, so thanks.
Thank you. And I have two more questions as well here. So Councillor Porter and then Councillor Thornborough.
Thank you very much. That's great. I think having it in the annual monitoring report will be a good idea. I suppose what I was asking officers as well is, are we going to make sure we keep an eye on applications coming through for this area, just to see if this is referenced, how people are picking up on it, whether we're getting any pushback or areas that sort of aren't working. So I just think that'll be really useful because it is a really good piece of work, but we can always learn because this is our first one. So I'd welcome it coming to the annual monitoring report, but perhaps also another report, perhaps coming back to, well, the planning committee potentially, or well, it'll be the exec next year if we were to move to cabinet or back to P&T. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Porter. And Councillor Thornborough.
Just 2 points. I think I just want to highlight the consultation because Trevin's not really mentioned the effort that to engage with the schools. And because this was a trial, it started off as a trial, it's been really interesting how we started with a normal, what might be a normal planning consultation, and then there was engagement with local groups and the schools, and the planning team have gone into several schools several times during the build-up, during the preparation of the draft document, and also during the consultation. So not only has it reached young children and future residents, but it also helped engage with families. And I think that if this trial is ever written up for government for other areas, the way that was done, I think, is exemplar. And I think that it's very interesting that we've had the South Newnham neighbourhood plan, and this sort of at the same time. It would be really interesting to see how they're both used for schemes coming forward. So I agree Katie Porrer's comment about reviewing and seeing how does this actually make better placemaking and better schemes, and it would also be interesting for us in Cambridge to see how the neighbourhood plan does the same. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thornborough. Traveen, would you like to reply to or comment on any point?
Yes, certainly on the review of the document. So, the design code taking forward as an SPD is the first step of giving the document some weight. So we are certainly, in the planning service, want to make sure that these documents are actually used by the developer, by the community, by planning officers, both in terms of designing schemes coming forward, but also in terms of assessing them. So, I think with regard to the assessment side, certainly any comments that are coming, any schemes that are coming forward, will certainly be scrutinized from these points and, will be included in planning officer's report moving forward. I mean, over time, we will obviously have to assess the impact of the decisions and planning applications coming forward. And those assessments, will be captured through the annual monitoring report to assess the impact that this code is actually having. And, there will come a point when through the new local planning process, we might have to look at and review SPDs overall generally. And if there are any lessons to be learned, we can make amendments, if required and when necessary to this document kind of moving forward. With regard to the extensive consultation, we did go in person and online, and both of those I think helped. And Councillor Katie's point I think is absolutely true. The YES team in the Greater Cambridge Shared Planning has gone several times to various schools through the process, as well as we've gone within the community rather than expecting them to come to us, to go and ask them what they thought about various aspects of the document. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, and Lizzie?
Thank you, Chair. Just feedback, since the adoption of the South Newnham Neighbourhood Plan, we had a really informative meeting with the forum where we invited them to meet our development management officers, and it was a really collaborative session where we went through the neighbourhood plan policies and talked about the implementation going forward and how we would monitor those policies. And it opened up that dialogue between the forum and officers, so we're looking forward to implementing it going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Lizzie. And would either Tom or Jane have anything else to add? Are you just happy? No? Okay. All right. Any more questions? No? Okay. So we'll now go to the vote, please. And the recommendations are on page 11 of the agenda pack. Now, may I ask all those in favour, please raise your hand.
Unanimous, Chair.
Thank you. And does the Executive Councillor agree with the recommendation?
I do. Thank you very much. And thank you for the team for all of their work in pulling this together. And I really look forward to seeing how this improves planning applications. Thanks.
Thank you. And thank you very much, Jane, Trovin and Tom. I think it's excellent work. So thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, so now we will turn to agenda item 6, which is actually from page 431 to 713, which is the Cambridge Biomedical Campus Supplementary Planning Document Adoption. And this is again a key decision, so I believe that this item will be introduced by Lizzie Wood, Principal Planning Policy Officer, who is here in the chamber, with Terry De Souza, team leader in support, who is joining us virtually. Lizzie, please start.
Thank you, Chair. So, as set out in our previous meetings where we've discussed this item, the Cambridge Biomedical Campus Supplementary Planning Document sets out guidance for future development at the campus for phases 1 to 3, as allocated in the adopted local plans. The SPD sets out planning principles to guide future development at the campus and provides a framework for consideration when determining planning applications. The SPD is split into 5 chapters, with chapters 4 and 5 dedicated to guidance on those principles that should be considered early on in the planning process in order to deliver high-quality development and to ensure that decisions made now do not undermine the potential future evolution of the campus. The draft SPD was subject to public consultation between November last year and January of this year, and 194 comments were received. Appendix A to the report presents in summary of the issues raised and the Council's assessment and how those issues have been addressed through our proposed modifications to the document. Within the report, in paragraph 4.8, there is a high-level summary of those key issues raised, and paragraph 4.10 of the report sets out how we address those issues through our proposed modifications. As a result, officers have prepared an amended version of the SPD that we are recommending for adoption today. Just to note, as Councillor Porra mentioned before, there was general feedback from residents and parish councils regarding the size of the consultation documents and the ability for consultees to review all of the materials that we put out there during the consultation period, noting that we had 3 go at once, which is a lot of information to take on board. We've taken this feedback on board and we're looking at how we can improve our future consultations, particularly for the local plan that's coming forward, and to ensure that all parties feel that they can meaningfully engage and contribute their views effectively in planning documents. Lastly, the same recommendations set out in the report were taken to Cabinet at South Cambs Council this morning, and they were agreed to, so they are recommending adoption as well. And we're therefore recommending to committee today that the Council adopt the Cambridge Biomedical Campus Supplementary Planning Document as per the recommendations set out in the report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Lizzie. And then before we move on to members' questions, I would like to invite Councillor Blackburn-Horgan to address the committee. So, Councillor Blackburn-Horgan, go ahead.
I'd like to let the councillors speak first and then I'll speak after them, if that's okay.
Sure, yep, that would be okay. Right,
Thank
so,
you.
okay, so any questions? Councillor Bajan.
Thank you, Chair. Just a comment, really, not a question, but it would be good if this sort of plan took into account the deliveries to sites such as big as this. And I think that I was at a meeting, a consultation meeting with the people that are the owners of the site, and they were talking about a logistics hub. And it would be good if we were to adopt a policy that required non-urgent deliveries, because it is a hospital, so some stuff will have to be delivered urgently, to go to a logistics hub and then be ferried into the hospital site or the whole site. And it's something that maybe we could look at in the future, and something that we could put on planning applications in the area. We could make it a requirement that they actually use a logistics hub. I thought it was an excellent idea. It was coming actually from the owners of the site, so the developers. So it would be a good idea for us to see where we could fit that in, if you get what I mean. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bajan. Do I have any other questions? Yes, Councillor Porra.
Thank you. Slightly wrestling with the papers. I just want to check, in the comments where it says CBC, I'm assuming that's CBC Limited, isn't it, who've commented? Because I know, yeah, that's just to clarify that. I mean, this is definitely very welcome. I think those of us who sit on Joint Development Committee have been very, very keen to get some kind of master planning or SPD, just to ensure that the developments coming forward, which are coming sort of thick and fast in this area, are actually strategic, and we don't end up building something that later prejudices against some of the active travel routes and wayfinding through the site. So this is very welcome, and thank you to officers. I'm really impressed by the fact every single comment has been addressed, you know, and explained and cross-referenced, and it's very useful to have the amended text, which obviously means you can read it again more quickly. I think obviously the priorities are for the Cambridge Biomed campus. I've talked to the Queen Edith councillors, so Councillors Young, Blackburn Hogan is here tonight, Lee and Beckett, just to make sure they were happy with the responses, and they were generally, although I'm sure Councillor Blackburn Hogan will speak for them herself. It is the community benefit that I think we have to focus on, and I think this helps do that, because this is obviously going to be a big emerging development, or getting even bigger, and it's really important that we look at the kind of bringing the local community with us on this, as well as things like housing provision. I wondered, in the section on culture and leisure, we don't explicitly mention nursery provision, but I mean, I know that is part of the developments coming forward anyway, but I do think that is something to note. I would interpret those kind of general community support as including nurseries, and I think we've had this discussion at various planning committees before, that if you build places that attract lots of workers but you don't have nursery places, then, you know, it's not going to work so well. So, and it is good to see that the whole of that, the CBC kind of developers and hospitals have come together to focus on this. So I think, apart from noting that the nursery provision is something I hope that officers will interpret as being part of that community support, and the need to focus on how the housing ties in with the local area, I'm very happy to support this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Porter. And Councillor Thornborough.
Yes, I think that the one reason why this came about was because the planning committees were looking at applications for individual sites, and there was a bit of a frustration that there wasn't a master plan, and that was discussed, and I think we hoped one would come forward, and I think finally the officers have taken on board to prepare this SPD, which actually helps bring cohesion to the development of this very important area. But it doesn't replace the need of a master plan, which I think we all here and on the planning committee still hope that will come forward in due course. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Thornborough. Lizzie, would you like to?
Thank you. Yes, just in response to Councillor Bajan, yeah, we totally understand the delivery and phasing and mechanisms to make sure that works effectively. And we hope that the SPD covers that off in the phasing and delivery section, noting that our local plan will also look at logistics hubs and how the site can work more effectively. Thank you. And in response to Councillor Porter, yeah, really welcome the positive feedback, and we're happy to amend Principle 4B.3.1 to include reference to nursery provision. That's fine with us. Thank you.
Thank you, Lizzie. And Councillor Blackburn-Horgan, would you like to ask your question or read your statement?
Yes. First of all, I do have a declaration to make, as I work as a biomedical scientist for the NHS CUH on the CBC site. So I welcome an SPD for the Cambridge Biomedical site. The work to produce and consult on the SPD demonstrates a commitment to the local plan and listening to locals, with consideration being demonstrated to how a site creating currently up to 55,000 people/vehicle movements twice daily can have cumulative unintended negative impacts on the environment, infrastructure, and residents' homes and lives. Where the planning guidance of an SPD may provide high-quality builds site-wide with dangers designed out, can only be beneficial as the site of the hospitals, university, and CBC research and corporate organisations drives towards its 2050 vision, planning global size continual growth over the next 30 years. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Blackburn-Horgan. And Councillor Beck.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I've got a couple of general comments. It may be because a supplementary planning document is sort of inherently a subordinate document to the local plan. But when we focus on this subject of the biomedical campus, it does raise the question about what is where and what are the limits of what we've got here. So the two things that cross my mind, bearing in mind that we really don't have a comparable place in Cambridge to the biomedical campus. It's kind of like an animal that we're finding our way with, and obviously is very difficult. But a couple of the things that it seems to me that we either need to deal with if we can't hear when we get to the local plan. Firstly is in relation to transport. So I noticed there's some good things in here about active travel, which obviously would welcome. There's much less in here about public transport, although there's obviously a welcome for the South Station. But what the site really needs, and really needs in terms of its impact on the surrounding parts of the city, is public transport from the north and the east of the city, which doesn't exist at the moment without going through the city centre. And this is something which would really help mitigate the impact of the campus on the rest of the city. And the other thing, well, in relation to transport as well, I noticed that the references to parking, I mean, I read them and I was sort of wondering whether it was even worth making those points about parking in the document, because it just seems to say, well, we'll look carefully at parking provision. But actually, there's probably a lot more that needs to be said about parking than that. And so it's a bit frustrating to see what you could look at as a bit of a mealy-mouthed statement about that. And then the other thing was about housing within the campus itself. And there isn't anything about that there either. And I just wondered if you could clarify, am I right that that's just because we can't do that? We're already hemmed in by our existing local plan, and we need another local plan to address those sort of questions.
Thank you, Councillor Beck. Lizzie?
Thank you. It's a tricky one with an SVD because there are many limitations to what you can put in there. Obviously, you can't add policy, but you can suggest and recommend through guidance, such as promoting sustainable transport and travel networks, trying to seek to improve connectivity on the campus as it is now. But as you say, it is the role of the local plan to pick up on those transport issues through our modelling and looking at evidence bases to support the local plan. So that should be coming forward through that. I note the omission of reference to housing within the campus. Again, that will be related to our affordable housing policies and allocation of housing in that area through the local plan. We could look at adding reference generally to what there is at the moment, but again, I don't know what that would add if it's just reference to what is on the campus at the moment. I know that my colleagues online, Stephen has his hand up first, and then Terry, I'm sure, would like to jump in. Thank you.
Yes, so Stephen, go ahead.
Thank you. Yes, and Councillor Bick, you raise an important point about that. I suppose emphasises the limitations of a supplementary planning document in that it must follow the adopted local plan versus the ambitions that we have for the next local plan, and indeed for the biomedical campus that has already been touched upon. There is a comprehensive project ongoing with the combined authority as the Transport Authority, with partners including GCP, to look at and model the transport consequences for the campus as it goes forwards. And as Lizzie's highlighted, in many respects, that will manifest itself through the local plan that will come out for consultation later in this year. And picking up on Councillor Bajent's points around consolidation and so forth, removing unnecessary trips to the campus, either because there's an opportunity to put some appropriate accommodation on the campus itself, or indeed through things like consolidation hubs, is part of the discussion that we will be having with you as members, but also the combined authority will be exploring through its transport strategy. So just to reassure you that it is being captured, this supplementary planning document is really a tool for development control decisions in the shorter term whilst that work comes forward, which we'll be sharing with you later in the year. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. And Terry?
Thank you, Chair. I won't repeat what Stephen and Lizzie have said, but just on the housing point in particular, only recently I was having discussions with colleagues from the housing teams at both councils, talking about the future housing provision on the campus. The campus have an ambition to increase the amount of housing that's on the campus at the moment. What's there? A large chunk of it is quite substandard. It's kind of built in the 60s and 70s and not really fit for purpose anymore. So we're looking at, what could potentially come forward through the local plan, and actually kind of thinking about the kind of mix and tenures of those properties. We don't know all of the detail at this stage, but trying to understand kind of what are the kind of principles, what's the campus seeking to achieve. So thinking about things like subsidised housing for campus workers, overnight accommodation for patients and their visitors, and also thinking about temporary accommodation for people, as they kind of move into the area, maybe on, from abroad or from on temporary contracts before they move into kind of more permanent housing elsewhere. So that's something that we're looking at the moment with colleagues across the housing services. But I suppose in some ways, from looking at what the phasing is like on the campus and thinking about future schemes coming forward, we don't anticipate any housing schemes coming forward ahead of the adoption of the local plan at this point in time, just because the kind of decant strategy that's going to be needed to move kind of parcels around and move existing land uses and constraints around within the campus. So whilst the SPD could potentially go further on some of these issues, it's probably better placed in the local plan, looking ahead to that kind of medium and longer term proposals. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Terry. John, do you have anything else to add? No? Okay. Now, are there any more questions before we move to vote? Yes, Lizzie?
Thank you. Could I just respond to Councillor Blackburn-Hogan online just to say thank you very much for your feedback, and we really appreciated all of the comments that you submitted during the consultation period. It was great to see the feedback from your community, and we hope that you'll be happy with the end product. Thank you.
Thank you. So should we move to vote now, please? The recommendations are on page 431 of the agenda pack. So all those in favour, please raise your hand.
Unanimous, Chair.
Thank you. So does the Executive Council agree the recommendation?
Yes, I do, and thanks to officers again for all their work. Thanks.
Thank you, and thank you very much, Lizzie and Terry. Thank you. Okay, so now we turn to agenda item 7, which starts on page 113, and is the Greater Cambridge Planning Obligations Supplementary Planning Document Adoption. And I believe this item will be introduced by Jonathan Dixon, Planning Policy Manager, as we're also joined virtually by James Fisher, Section 106 Officer. So, John, start. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'm picking up this one of the 4 SPDs you've got before you tonight. This one intends to provide guidance on how the Council seeks to apply and seek planning obligations through the Section 106 process, which aims to secure the necessary infrastructure to support the needs generated by developments. Its overall aim is part of a wider project, particularly that the team that work on planning applications have been carrying out, including James online, to speed up the planning application process and support the delivery of sustainable development. The aim of providing further guidance through the SPD is to really set out up front to developers, applicants, and members of the public how the process operates, the sort of planning obligations we would seek, our starting point for how we work out those requirements, and indeed going down to the detail how we might seek to calculate some of the actual financial asks. We carried out the public consultation between November and January, like 3 of the SPDs in front of you tonight, and we got 198 comments on this one. It's a technical document, and therefore a lot of the comments came from developers or their agents. Issues raised included looking at or concerns about some of the costs, whether they were justified, whether they would impact on development viability, and quite a range of other technical detail and, in some cases, legal matters. You'll see we've gone through and provided, in response to the comments raised, response comments to all of those, which I think runs to about 100 pages in total. We've done a lot of work considering carefully the comments that have come into us. Whilst we still consider there is a sound document here, and the overall approach to the document and what it seeks to do and the approach it takes is sound, we think that does need to be some amendments and responses made to the comments received. We also think that there is more information we can provide to provide further justification behind some of the indicative costings we provide in the document. In order to reduce the risk of challenge and provide people the chance to comment on what might be some significant amendments to that document, we're actually recommending tonight that you don't agree to adopt the document, but instead you authorise officers to consider the comments further, make change to the document, and to agree in consultation through the lead member and with the chair and spokes. Revisions to the document allow us to carry out a further public consultation that we would then come back to you with the findings of that further consultation before considering adoption of the document in due course. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, John. Are there any questions? Yes, Councillor Purr. Go ahead.
Thank you very much, Chair. Again, thank you very much for this large number of comments and all the officer actions. That's really helpful. I'm supportive of the idea of deferring this and doing another round of consultation. I would ask, hopefully, when it comes back, you have the track changes like you did for the previous one, because that is incredibly helpful for committee members to actually see what's changed, as well as the comments. I noticed in chapter 2, which is page 14 or page 736, depending on which pack you're looking at, it's talking about reducing the charges from 1,500 to 1,000. It would just be useful to know when that comes back why we're doing that, because obviously I appreciate, we must have worked them out at 1,500 previously, so that would just be a useful bit of information to have, not now, but when it comes back. Chapter 6, biodiversity, so that's page 747 or 25. I think I'd really like to be clear that the preference is for biodiversity net gain on site wherever possible, just to make sure that links up with our other documents. Because obviously I appreciate some of the government moves are meaning there's an off-site delivery, but certainly in terms of open spaces and canopy cover and loss of verdant characters, having it on site. So I just hope, as and when off, because I think it says you're reviewing those comments, I would very much hope that that can come back with a clear steer that on site, and if not near site, is very much more desirable than buying some units miles away. I would add in nursery provision again, because again, it's an important part of the infrastructure. And again, I appreciate this is more potentially about S106s, but anything officers can do to kind of strengthen that idea that you need to provide for people who've got care responsibilities who want to work. But generally, I'm supportive of what officers are asking for tonight. I think it's a sensible way forward. So thank you very much to everyone for all their work on all of these documents.
Thank you very much. Are there any other questions before? Okay, so Councillor Swift.
Thanks, Chair. It's really just the further consultation. When will that be initiated and how long will it go on for before the results are published? Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Thurman.
Yeah, I think I'm really pleased that that we're following the real consultation properly, because of I think it's really important that when this level of comments come back, that it is right and proper, that it's incorporated in the right way, and then it's so substantial that it goes out to consultation again. I think it's more work for the officers and everyone involved, but I think it's absolutely the right recommendation here. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Thurber. John, would you like to reply?
I can start, but I've got my secret Section 106 manager online who I might be able to bring in to answer those technical points. On the fees issue, I might have to bring James on that one. On the biodiversity comment, I think we'll certainly have to look at the wording. Our aim in putting the wording together was almost not to change the approach to BNG in this particular one because we've got the biodiversity SPD. But if it's missing some references that could be clear on those points that are already covered, I'm happy to pick that one up. Nursery provision is an interesting one because obviously a lot of that is private, but there is elements of that picked up in the education cost. James might be able to allude to that one. On the consultation, we haven't yet named a date. I think you're right, it's important we do name the date to make sure there's notice of that coming up. I think we'll certainly aim to try and get it done before the summer break, and our natural period will be 6 weeks again. If we can do that, I think we should try and stick with that. But I'll certainly be aiming to identify the date in due course, and of course we'll let members know, and indeed put it on the website so people know it's coming. James, I don't know if you're online, you can hear us, if you can pick up a couple of those points.
Yeah, hi. Thanks, John. Good evening, everyone. I mean, the premise of the Section 106 monitoring contribution is to ensure that the costs and the costs in relation to the administration of the agreement are fully covered. We need to also make sure that only the costs are covered. Planning practice guidance is incredibly clear in that respect. So there's a balance between approaching it in a very transparent way, but also ensuring that the developer isn't unduly burdened by providing a cost that exceeds that which is necessary. And so, yes, we have constructed a charging regime. We have received considerable representations on that. We are looking to review it. As the representation response suggests, we are looking at reducing one aspect of it, just to make sure that the developers aren't paying more than that which is ultimately necessary. I don't believe there are any other technical points that required comment at this stage.
Thank you very much, James. Now, are there any other questions at all? Yes, Councillor Parr.
Apologies if this is in there, but I'm assuming any charges would be linked to inflation or something. This wouldn't commit us to only being exactly £1,000 for the next 10 years. Just to, again, that's not for answer now, but just obviously when that comes back, it would be good to clarify, because obviously costs at the moment sadly go up quite a lot. So I think we need to make sure whatever we put in here is keeping pace with that, I think.
Thank you, Councillor Parr. I think they've noted that as well. If there are any more points to make, then we can move to the vote then. So, and the recommendations are on page 713 of the agenda pack. So all those in favour, please raise your hands.
That's unanimous, Chair.
Thank you. And does the Executive Council agree with the recommendation?
Yes, I do. Thank you very much.
And thank you very much, Jonathan and James. Thank you. And we will now turn to agenda item 8, which starts on page 809, and it's the Greater Cambridge Health Impact Assessment Supplementary Planning Document. It's the adoption. And for this item, I would like to welcome Vaughan Bryan, Policy Planner, who is actually joining us virtually, and Jonathan Dixon and Yvonne O'Donnell, an Environmental Health Manager, who is also attending online. So Vaughan, please start.
Thank you, Chair. So, as set out in previous meetings on this item, the Greater Cambridge Health Impact Assessment SPD sets out planning guidance for the production and coordination of health impact assessments, or HIAs. So as a refresher, HIAs are tools designed to assess how a development proposal may impact upon the wider determinants of health within both existing and prospective communities. The wider determinants of health considered by HIAs can include, but are not limited to, elements such as the quality of natural environments, the quality of built development, the functionality of local economies, and the sense of community. Assessments of health impact are already a policy requirement across the Greater Cambridge area, with local planning policy requiring the potential impacts on health to be assessed where development surpasses certain thresholds or meets certain criteria. The HIS SPD is designed to provide supplementary guidance on how existing policy requirements can be achieved in such a way that aligns with national guidance on health impact assessments that was published by Public Health England in 2020. The SPD itself is split into 5 chapters, with Chapter 4 referencing existing policy requirements, both locally and national, and Chapter 5 providing guidance on the stages of HIAs. Public consultation on the draft SPD was undertaken between November 2024 and January 2025 in the same way as the previous 2 SPDs that have just been discussed, and 32 comments were received in relation to this SPD. Appendix A to the report presents the summary of matters raised by respondents, the Council's response to consultee comments, and how those issues have been addressed through proposed modifications to the SPD. Broad support for the guidance contained within the HISPD was received from various consultees, including parish councils, public bodies such as the County Council in Historic England, the NHS Property Services, and developers and private agents. And this also included support for the HIA checklist included at Appendix 3 of the SPD as a tool to help frame HIAs in Greater Cambridge. There were a small number of respondents that did question whether the SPD sought to introduce another document that would encumber development, but as I've noted previously, HIAs and the assessment of health impacts on development and of development are already a local planning policy requirement, and the SPD only seeks to provide guidance on how these policy requirements may be achieved, and it does not seek to introduce new policy requirements. Notwithstanding that, the updated MPPF does contain a notable increase in the number of references to delivering healthy places and facilitating healthy behaviour through placemaking. Therefore, local planning authorities have a greater duty to recognise and agree development solutions that deliver healthy spaces, and HIAs are a key tool in achieving this end. Requests and questions were raised in relation to minor technical matters, which have been summarised in paragraph 4.10 of the report, and modifications have been made to the SPD to address the differences between HIAs at the outline and reserve matter stages of the planning process, and changes to references in the MPPF as the 2024 version was published after this SPD was made live for public comment. The accompanying consultation statement for the HISPD highlights in detail minor amendments made to the SPD in response to the matters raised. The only other noteworthy amendment made was to the formatting of the checklist at Appendix 3, which has now been reformatted from a bullet point format to a tabular format to improve the usability for both officers and applicants. As noted earlier, there was support for this checklist tool, and this reformatting should help improve the legibility and usability of the tool. So overall comments on the HISPD were largely positive, and only minor amendments were required to the SPD in light of the programme of consultation. Therefore, we've set out our recommendations in relation to the adoption of the Greater Cambridge Health Impact Assessment SVD in the report. The recommendations for adoption being brought forward for the adoption of this SPD were accepted by South Cambs at Cabinet earlier today, and thus we're making the same recommendations in relation to the adoption of the Greater Cambridge HISPD. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vaughan. And then are there any questions? Okay, so I have Councillor Bajan and Councillor Porter. So Councillor Bajan.
Thank you, Chair. To what extent was air pollution part of this consideration, particularly the air pollution from traffic in the City of Cambridge? And the other question is about a ban on smoking. It appears to be happening in children's centres, but should it not be something that we should be considering on a far wider basis? Adam Brooks Hospital will shortly have a complete ban on smoking within its grounds. Now, of course, it's obviously a place where nobody should smoke, but actually nobody should smoke anywhere. And I wondered if we thought about those two things. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bajan. Councillor Porter.
Thank you, Chair. Again, another impressive document. Thank you very much to officers. In fact, the whole agenda tonight is a huge lot of paperwork, but you can see how hard the officers work to actually address comments. I think it's really, really good. So very welcome. I wonder how many other places have got these? Are we kind of leading the field in this. I think it's good if we are. And I suppose my question is a bit like the design code. How are we going to monitor this? Because I think it's really important we see if it is actually being used, or whether we're getting developments coming forward where they try and say, oh, well, we don't need one of these because we've addressed it under a different bit of paperwork we've submitted. So I just, again, welcome officers' comments on how and when we'll review it. Obviously, it could come up in annual monitoring, but I think this one's probably a bit wider. And I'd just like, because it would be really useful to see which bits work and which bits don't work. So obviously we know what we might need to tweak or address in the emerging local plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Porter. I'll go back to you, Vaughan, before I take the other two questions that are on the floor here. So Vaughan, and then Stephen as well has his hand up. So go ahead.
Of course. So in relation to the question on whether other areas have HIA SPDs and whether they integrate and use these tools, London definitely does. So the Healthy Urban Development Unit, the Hoodoo checklist, was one of the primary tools that we used and adapted with their blessing. So it's a tool that's been rolled out in London, Birmingham, Brighton and Hove. So it's something that is becoming more prevalent in practice, particularly after Public Health England published their national guidance in 2020. What we've done with our SPD is make sure that it's relevant to the local area and context. In relation to the consideration of air quality and smoking, broadly speaking, so this is a supplementary planning document that outlines the guidance for the process of conducting a health impact assessment. And there are various determinants of growth, determinants of health that are considered within the scope of a health impact assessment, one of which can be air quality and the quality of air in public places. That's one of the broad aspects. Of course, those things can also be dealt with as part of air quality assessments as well. Whether Yvonne has any additional pointers when it comes to smoking in public places, that might be something I'd leave to Yvonne.
Yeah, I can pick that up, Ron, if that helps.
Yep.
So banning of smoking obviously is a legal requirement under the Health Act. So that looking to be expanded elsewhere. It's going to be very, very difficult to banning smoking through a HIA. I think that is already picked up by
Yvonne, apologies, you froze, so.
Oh,
yeah.
So can you hear me now?
We can hear you now, yes.
Okay, in respect of the air quality, that's already picked up through when we do the environmental considerations through my EQG team, when we look at air quality, contaminated land, odour and noise, when we look at environmental impacts of new developments as we move forward. So yeah, so I think the air quality is already picked up through other processes, and the banning of smoking is quite controversial, but it does fall under the Health Act that we enforce on.
Thank you, Yvonne. And Stephen?
Well, just to actually emphasise the point that Yvonne's made, this is a planning policy document effectively as a supplement to a planning policy. It would be ultra vires, so it would exceed the provisions of this policy to seek to use it to do things like ban smoking in particular locations or places. So we have to follow the kind of legislative trail of what is the most appropriate and relevant legislation, which Yvonne has helpfully outlined. So we can only go so far in planning. I think the important point is about creating the mindfulness in all developers about the significance and importance of health in their development, even and you'll see in this document the kind of expansion of recognition about the importance of mental health in the design and consideration of new developments, which is probably something that's been perhaps less well covered in the process, and fits with the well-being thread that the emerging local plan is amplifying as a significant determinant of the way that we do development in future. So we hope to cover what we can. but this is a stepping stone on that way.
Thank you. I'll take the other two questions I have. So Councillor Pounds and then Councillor Klopp. So Councillor Pounds.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, it's a really, really impressive document. Thank you very much. I just had a couple of points that came to mind, really. The first thing is, are we going to be able to enable those people who are working in Cambridge but who commute from nearby villages? Have we given some consideration to how they can benefit from this? And the second point was also, have we learned, are we looking at lessons learned from the pandemic? Because we know then, during the pandemic, just how important spaces, particularly green spaces, were to health. I think you've touched on it already, Stephen, but it's just a specific point about the pandemic. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Klopp.
Yes, just apologies. I think I've asked this question before, but I can't remember the answer. Why is it that we've got the 100 limit for Cambridge and the 20 houses, 20 dwellings limit in South Cambs? Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions before we move on? Yes, Councillor Porter.
Just to pick up, I asked about how it would be monitored. Apologies, I didn't think I had the response on that, just to check. Thank you.
Thank you. Vaughan, would you like to start?
Yeah, so in terms of consideration of how people in the local area and existing local communities can benefit, so as noted earlier, HIAs do consider the prospective health impacts on both future communities and existing communities. So my computer's just decided to do something. Oh. Apologies if I drop out. Apparently my computer needs to restart. So it considers how prospective communities and existing communities can benefit from a development, and that can also broadly, so sense of community is one thing, and community facilities, local green spaces, and the quality of environments, but also then a consideration for local economies and how they can function, how people can benefit in the movability between spaces. So it's very broad and multifaceted in that respect, where it covers a lot of different elements in relation to that are both directly and indirectly related to health. In relation to the consideration of the post-pandemic world, I think this is where the broad thread and push for increased references to health and delivering healthy spaces in planning has broadly come from. So the MPPF was updated in December 2024, and there's a pronounced integration of health and delivering healthy spaces within that. Already assessing health impacts from development is a requirement in the local plans, but Public Health England's guidance on how to produce HIAs and the way that we have a look at health in planning is something that is pronounced and something that this SPD ultimately seeks to help facilitate and deliver upon. In terms of the limits and thresholds, the limits and thresholds that have been provided in the SPD are based on policy thresholds. So in terms of the 20 limit, that's already established and enshrined within the South Cambs local plan. So as noted already, the SPD doesn't seek to introduce new policy requirements. It's not here to introduce anything new. It's here to supplement the guidance, provide supplementary guidance in order to deliver on health aims and the policies within the local plans already. And then in terms of the monitoring, yeah, I believe you already noted, Councillor, about the ability to monitor using authority monitoring reports. I know from conversations as well with Yvonne and counterparts on the South Cambs side that those conversations between health officers and DM officers and policy officers are being had in terms of monitoring the effectiveness of these policies and also the guidance. In that regard as well, there was also insertions of monitoring of the guidance and the checklists and the tools that we're bringing at regular intervals to make sure that the practice is in line with best practice standards. I hope that answers your questions. If John and Yvonne have anything additional to add.
Vaughan, your answer is very comprehensive. I would just add there's some slight differences in the thresholds of the different councils, because one of the challenges we have doing what is very helpfully joint SPDs is their source material is still two different local plans. So what we've tried to do is meet the policy requirements of both plans. And in this case, we think we've got the right balance between applying the two different councils. So whilst the thresholds are slightly different in places, we think we've got that balance right here. Obviously, with the benefit of having the new local plan, we get to start with a clean slate and get aligned. But also, hopefully, there was the point about monitoring. We've now got at least another few months, if not through to adoption, you know, a year or two, to see how these thresholds work. Best practice in this area is still evolving. Working with people like Yvonne and South Camp's equivalent to get the most out of this process. So I have no doubt we'll have learnings where we might want to tweak this, the threshold and so on, but I think this gives us a great start to use the tool as well as possible in the interim period.
Thank you, John. Yes, Councillor Parr.
No, that's really great. I just would welcome at some point the review coming towards probably planning committees, I'm guessing would be best. It's just be really interesting to see how it's used and for members to have some input on that, because obviously we'll be potentially talking to residents and people who've been affected. So it'll be good. I'm sure you'll be monitoring. I know you're very good at that in planning teams, but it would be great for that to come back to the two local authorities at some point for a proper review.
Thank you. And then Yvonne, did you have your hand raised before?
Now, I think the points have been answered. Thanks.
Okay, any other points to make from anybody? No question. Councillor Athenborough.
Yes, I think even though we're fitting within existing policy and pulling things together into one report, by having a report that's specific, that is easier to look at when we see an application, will give us an opportunity to think more carefully about the health benefits of every project we've got, the placemaking opportunities to improve the lives for all of us is a really good focus. So I think it's a really interesting way of going forward, and I hope the committee will agree. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Athenborough. Okay, if there are no more points or questions or issues to raise, then we can move to the vote, please. So the recommendations are on page 809 of the agenda pack. So all those in favour, please raise your hand.
Again, unanimous, Chair.
Thank you very much. And does the Executive Councillor agree the recommendation?
I do, and thank you for the committee and also all of the officers involved in all of these SPDs and the one to come back. So it's really, really good bringing all these all together, because we're going to be very busy focusing on the local plan consultation soon. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you very much to the officers of Vaughan and Yvonne and John and Lizzie. So thank you very much, and that now concludes the Planning and Transport Scrutiny Committee. So thank you everyone who took part, and please can the meeting producer now stop the live stream. Thank you.